Hey everybody, welcome to their Throwback Thursday GMG review. Today we're taking a look at a follow-up book to my Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay review from last week. It's a companion volume, not another edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, but a game that is very much cut from the same cloth and in a different universe. It is Inquisitor. Now, this game is really near and dear to me. This was one of the first times I was really challenged by a miniature game. And when I say challenged, I mean my mind kind of got bent by it. I didn't know what to make of it, and my friends and I at the time, my buddy Christian and we really dove into it in a weird way when a lot of other people weren't super excited about it. So I kind of have to set the scene. This book came out in, I think, 99 or 2000. It is 2001. And for its time, you got to think 2001 is the height of 3rd edition 40k. It's Battle for Armageddon, Black Templar Supplement Codex. You know, like we're transitioning out of metal models from 2nd edition 40k into like a full line of plastic models. The new Rhino I don't think has come out yet. Like there's a bunch of like throwbacks in the game, and 40k is very much defined as a war game. A lot of the role playing has gone out of I guess the sort of the hobbyist genome at that point. And Games Workshop is very much the 90s, like post 90s Games Workshop, where everything is very heavily branded. You play the games sort of as you see them in White Dwarf. And so this book is a really bold endeavor because even the universe for 40k at the time is still pretty goofy. It's coming off 2nd edition. It's all very bright colors. You know, we're talking about orcs with checks and dags, goblin green bases. The era of 40k being a serious subject, or even just being an IP that you think of as seriously, hasn't really started yet. And this book kicks it off in a big way. Not just because of this individual publication as a role-playing game and as a tabletop sort of like role-playing game, but because the ancillary products come out with it. There are 3 books published along with this volume, which are Xenos, Malleus, and Hereticus, the Eisenhorn trilogy that really changed the face of how seriously the Games Workshop 40k IP is taken, and sets in place things that between that and Gaunt's Ghost, which is a little bit before that, sets in place a lot of terminology and just kind of how we see the Imperium. Just the boilerplate in this, which is great. You've been told that of the Inquisition, the shadowy organization that defends mankind and the Emperor from the perils of heresy, possession, alien dominance, and rebellion. So you've been told about them. It's 2nd edition 40k. They're just these like paragons, basically. You've been told the Inquisition is the ultimate defense against the phantoms and fears and terror which lurk in the darkness between the stars. You've been told the Inquisition are the bright saviors in an eclipse of evil, purest and most devoted warriors of the Emperor. You've been told the Inquisition is united in its cause to rid the galaxy of any threat from within or without. Everything you've been told is a lie. And that really does set the stage. And those books move 40k out of just being heroes fighting on a battlefield to sort of the shadowy underbelly of the Imperium. And we get terminology we didn't really have before. We know what coffee is called. We know what your hamburgers are made out of in a much bigger way. Necromunda kind of started that ball rolling, but because it was so post-apocalyptic and it was in the slums of like a dying world, it wasn't the same as like, you know, Beckwin and Eisenhorn riding a train somewhere. It just like sort of like general Imperium. And that's where this book is set. This book is set in the shadowy sort of like just different stratas of society between rival Inquisitors. So it's written by Gab Thorpe, all the design concepts and art done by John Blanche, graphics and layout by Stefan Kapinski, and then color productions by Adrian Woods. The colors are beautiful, Karl Kapinski and Stefan Kapinski. You got Inquisitor Tyrus there. And then the miniature designers were Mark Bedford, Jez Goodwin, Mark Harrison, Gary Morley, Brian Nelson, Alan Perry, and Michael Perry. Now it's worth noting one other thing about these miniatures. You can see here on the cover plate, and how confusing this game was to contemporary hobbyists. Everything was in 54 mil. And so we didn't have scenery the right size. We didn't have really a concept of how to adapt our current scenery. Some stuff kind of worked, like barrels kind of worked. For the most part, you were looking at sort of sourcing scenery elsewhere. And these are big miniatures. Like these are twice the height of a standard gaming miniature, which was 28 mil at the time. So even though certain heroic miniatures could be used between, you know, the 40k line and this line required you to buy some very big, expensive showcase miniatures. It was a really bold decision at the time. And I would say one of the reasons we aren't still playing this game today is probably because of that choice to to upscale the miniatures to double size. And they're a lot of fun. They're hugely fun to paint and convert and stuff, but at the same time, it was a challenge, I think, for a lot of contemporary gamers to wrap their heads around needing a specific model line. I would imagine that if they'd made them in 28 mil, we'd still be seeing those miniatures get used today. And so, why is this a cool follow-up for a look at Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay? Well, it uses the same engine. The character profile is pretty much the same, and it goes a lot of sort of like the way to describing, hey, this is why this is different. But before we even get to that, there's just a huge, description basically of all the different factions inside the Inquisition, the Puritans and the Radicals. Stuff we kind of take it for granted today. This was all new. This is all new information, and this art is so dark compared to the art we're used to at the time for second edition, where there could be like grots in the margins running around and chasing things. It's this wonderfully grim, like just horrifying kind of like dark Imperium that we're peering into. Very much more like the 80s Imperium than the sort of like 90s kind of more cartoony Imperium. And even just like weird stuff in the liners, like you're weak, vulnerable, human is your frailty. I am strong, and yet still you judge me, and yet you still judge me for my sins, who art most sinful to the heart. It's like just weird little catechisms and stuff. And so they went a lot of ways to define, like, what is a narrative war game? Who's a game master? How do you... These terms that we would kind of take for granted before, and like you need a calculator and D10s for the game. It was D10s instead of D6s for the most part because it was all percentile. It's very much you play this how you want to play it. And again, this was really a struggle for contemporary wargamers at the time who were used to like codex, rules, point values, army list construction. There's none of that in here. It's build the warband you like. Here's some pre-made characters. Here's how you make characters of the same type. And so every class had its own miniature and its own pre-made character, and then the characters had their own sort of like, here's how you make a character in that format. And so for the most part, it's fairly rules light because you don't actually have a really set number of actions. Like you can attack someone, you can shoot someone, but for the most part you say what you want to do and then you roll a number of dice equal to your initiative, and every 4+ you get to do one of those actions during a turn. So it had a lot of, and it was your initiative divided by 20. So like if you were initiative 99, you'd get potentially 4 actions per turn, 4 dice on a 4+ you could try and do. And an action could be anything. It could be like reload your gun, run, up to your basic movement speed, however you wanted to define what you wanted to do. And then how far you got along the chain of actions you're trying to perform was how many 4+s that you rolled. And things could modify that and stuff too. But you'll see here the profile is basically the same as the Fantasy Roleplay one, with the exception there's no movement. Movement was kind of defined by the action sequence. Percentiles for weapon skill, will skill, strength, toughness, initiative, willpower. But then your other stats were sagacity, so kind of like your intelligence, your nerve, which is like your braveness, and your leadership, which is again your ability to like pass on and influence others. And so willpower is typically used for your psychic powers. Sagacity was your smarts, and then nerve was like your ability to keep calm under fire. And you're doing D100 tests for all of these, so you're modifying up and down, just like in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, how your stat basically ends up being, and then your test is equal to or under your modified stat. And of course, low is better, high is worse. Now you could also do actions, and the turn sequence is so simple. It's just say a number of actions equal to your your current speed. That's right, you'd move your speed. And your action roll for each 6 or more, you'd perform the action of declared in the order they were declared in. The required action roll may be modified due to character special abilities, blah, blah. Note that the player rolls a number of dice equal to the character's speed, not the number of actions required. This means that although characters with a speed of 7 or higher can still perform 6 actions per turn, they're rolling more dice and are more likely to succeed. So I think your speed was the number of actions is equal to speed, the speed characteristic. You can never do more than 6 actions per turn. What was your speed again? I think it was maybe your initiative divided by 10, because you could never do more than 6, but your initiative was usually between like 70 or 80. So you're you also have risky actions. If you do something that's like scary, like firing a plasma gun, sprinting across rubble, and then if it was if you roll more 1s than 6s when you do your action, you foul up and you have to see what the bad stuff is. So firing a plasma weapon, like you could fall down if you're doing something on rubble, you could explode, you could drop a grenade right in your feet, or it just doesn't go off. You can draw and change weapons, and then combine actions like running and shooting, but then it becomes harder to do certain actions. They become risky when you do them. Pausing for breath gives you bonuses later on, and then it's your turn sequence. it's actions and pause and breath afterwards. Take a breath that allows everybody to clear off their actions and go down. And then your stance for movement. What was your speed again? Stance. You're standing, kneeling, crouching, or prone. Those are your stances. And your basic, like, how you perform all your different actions you want to declare. Your rules for terrain. Shooting in line of sight. Your accuracy. So, like, your bonus is based on your weapon, how innately accurate it is. Like, rapid fire weapons could be less accurate. You know, other weapons like flamethrowers and stuff could be more accurate because they're easier to hit with. 45-degree vision arcs. Your vision arc was fairly low. Auto hits and auto misses based on your movements, moving and shooting, target size. And then, yeah, your range in yards. Every inch was a yard, basically. Again, crazy sort of like combining real life and rules. Your other modifiers for hitting. And it was pretty detailed in like the things that could happen over the course of a game. Firing full auto, getting bonuses and trying to like spread your shots around. Fighting in melee, breaking off. Counterattacking, making close combat attacks, parrying, injuries and recovery. So like when you got shot, you get shot in a location. So you always have to roll a D100. You get shot in the right leg, the left leg, the groin. I got shot with a melting gun in the groin once, my Space Marine. Right arm, left arm, abdomen, chest, and head. We're going to talk about Space Marines in a second, actually, because Space Marines were an issue with this game. But we'll do that when we get to like the stat lines and stuff. And so your armor would be by location. So like if you had robes or whatever, they would cover X number of locations on your body. And if you had an open helmet, a closed helmet, however you wanted to do it, your powered armor would give you 10 points in every location it's covering. Carapace, 6 locations. So like you basically have protection where you buy the armor to cover your body. And if you don't have the armor, then it doesn't. And then cover would provide different levels of protection too. So like plasteel, you know, things you're hiding behind. If you got hit somewhere, it would cover you. And it was basically where you're covering the miniature. So if just your head's poking out and it hit you somewhere like in the chest, it would reduce the damage, but you'd still get hit in the chest because it was just going through whatever your cover was. And then getting injured and system shock. So system shock was a big deal. If you took a certain amount of damage in a single hit, you'd have to test on your remaining toughness value. So whenever you took damage, it would reduce your toughness. Your remaining toughness value, you'd have to make a percentile roll on. If you failed it, you just pass out. So as soon as you took too much damage, you might not die, but you might just pass out and basically become unconscious. And if you took your complete toughness and wounds, you're bleeding to death and almost dead. And then so you had a critical damage table, sort of like in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, where if you took like a huge amount of damage to a location, like it was crippled, the character's dead. If your head gets crippled, you're just dead. Acute, immediate, character automatically suffers system shocks if you take like a huge amount of damage. You have to pass the toughness test or become stunned. And then same like your arms, light, nothing, heavy, immediately drop your objects you're holding. Crippled, test for system shock. Drop everything, you can't hold anything because it's bleeding. And then you go into recovery. At the end of every turn, each injured character makes a toughness test. If this passed, they recover D3 damage points. Add +1 to the score for every 10 points of toughness above 50. A character may spend actions attempting to recover, specifically specify the location you're trying to recover to or whatever, and then heal D3 damage points to the above specified location. And it's healed back an injury level too, depending on how badly injured it is. So like you'd go like serious to heavy, heavy to light. And it's basically you like putting a splint on, you know what I mean? Like, was that Pitt in that movie Green Room? He just duct tapes his arm back together. That's a horrifying scene. A guy gets chopped in the arm by a machete. And then your awareness, like what you can see, what you can hear for sneaking. There's a lot of like really solid sneaking rules. And then all your talents, these are like your special skills. Things like loading quickly, true grits, being heroic, dodging. And you can see I had everything tabbed for when we're playing games, because you only play with like 3 or 4 models. And then your psychic abilities, because there's a huge pile of different psychic powers, biomancy, telepathy, and a lot of like the later psychic disciplines that came in like 7th edition, 6th edition, 40k come from this list. Just the names even: telekinesis, pyromancy, demonology. And then all your exotic abilities, like if you're demonic, because obviously you could be like a demon host in this. And then mixing and matching special abilities and stuff too. The armory, just fantastic illustrations. The armory, so like the guns you would fire, the different ranges they'd have, and these are their range bands, so like what their optimum range is, and that's just, it goes back to the range thing in the shooting test for like your number of yards for being optimum. naval pistols, heavy stubbers, dueling pistols, shotguns, sawn-off shotguns, las guns, long rifles, multi-lasers, anything you could think of in 40k was in here. What I loved though, and this is one of my favorite things, was they gave you different rules for different patterns of bolter. Because the new Godwin like sickle mag bolters were basically coming in with the 3rd edition Space Marine kits. The older pattern bolters with the straight mags are in here, but also like a belt feed, a drum mag, like there's rules for like literally different kinds of bolt guns. That's a really cool detail. Heavy carbines, bolt carbines, melta-guns, plasma blasters, plasma pistols, thermal lances, multi-meltas. So like a multi-melta is probably the most dangerous gun in the game in this game. It's a heavy weapon, it's range A, so it's fairly short range, single shot. It's accuracy -5, so -5 to hit. But it does 7d10 damage. So think about how much damage, potentially 70 damage when like most human stats float in the 40s to 50s for like the percentile stats. So it just melts somebody, like just vaporizes them. So bear that in mind, 70 points of damage is the most damage any gun can do in the game when we get to some of the later characters. Just think about that, keep that in your head. Flamer weapons, bows, crossbows, even like light weapons and stuff, like black powder pistols and stuff, because like obviously feral worlds and stuff, they wanted you to have the rules to be able to accommodate for that, and even use your fantasy miniatures. Hand bows, bolas, nurdle shredders, psi cannons, Kroot long rifles, Necrontyr Gosphere, because they wanted you to have Xenos weapons too, right? So Xenos tech that your Xenos Inquisitors might have stolen and used, because Radical Inquisitors would use like alien technology. Inquisitor Erasmus purges the Sect of the Dark Light by Dave Gallagher. Oh, Dave Gallagher art is so classic. I love this miniature. I wish they made a miniature for him, actually. He's fabulous. And then close combat weapons, everything you possibly think of, from like an improvised like gun butt to eviscerators, power fists, power halberds. Demonic weapons, so like different kinds of weapons that you could have inside your demon weapon. Is it a corruptor? Is it a deathlust weapon? Is it gnawing, lashing? Agonizers, so other you know, like weapons like a Venom Talon or Lacerator from the Dark Eldar are in here. Dark Eldar have just come out too. If you ever think 2001, it's like 99 is their edition box set. So Dark Eldar are like pretty new on the scene right now too, so they're kind of in everybody's mind. Super Frag and Super Crack for crack grenades and frag grenades for your missiles and grenades. Psych Out, Photon Flash. Inquisitor Augustus battles the Creeping Shadow Cult, again by Dave Gallagher. Another fantastic. I love this guy's big, huge power fist because you can actually see his hands inside them and like how it's articulating. Armor and Force Fields. It's like Ceramite Armor, Bond Armor. This wonderful Vitruvian man. I think this is Jez Goodwin. Yeah, this is Jez Goodwin. This is a fantastic art piece. It's hard to see because it's just split down the middle here. I think this was in the later Mechanicus Codex too. But the Vitruvian man Mechanicus style by Jez Goodwin is one of the great 40k art pieces I think of all time. Stims, getting addicted to stims, hallucinogen effects. There's bugs all over me. My hand turned into something, man. Like just weird stuff. The worms are eating my brain. Cyber creatures, like just a huge amount of equipment. All right, well, let's get to creating a character though. So creating characters, again, they gave you a miniature for basically every archetype of character and every one of the different imperial sort of like sects too for Inquisitors. So here we have an Inquisitor character, how you make an Inquisitor, and you're basically going to be an Acolyte, an Inquisitor, or a Lord. You always start typically as an Acolyte, but there's no rule saying you can't be a Lord. It was really just down to like your GM and the character creation guidelines they gave you, and there's none in this book. So it's kind of just freestyle it, let your GM tell you what you're going to bring to the table, and then make miniatures for it and play. So there's a very Rogue Trader feel to that, right? Like, you don't know what you're going to bring. You're rolling a random chart to see what it is. And so like an Acolyte would be like 65 plus 2d10 weapon skill, 55 plus 2d10 ballistic skill, toughness 50 plus 2d10, strength 50 plus 2d10, and then like initiative 55 plus 3d10. Well, and then the smart stats are all really high. So like 60, 65, 70, 70 base, and like 2d6, 2d6, 3d6, 3d10. And your example here is a miniature. This is the Jez Goodwin's Inquisitor Covenant, one of the most popular miniatures, I think, probably for this game. And he had some pretty baller stats. He had a Psi Cannon and a Force Sword. Eisenhorn's another example here. So you got your Xenos Inquisitor. So he was a Malleus Inquisitor. This is a Xenos Inquisitor, and then Tyrus, my favorite one. Oh, he's so cool. Inquisitor Tyrus, he's the Hereticus one. He's the monodominant. So his whole thing is just that like he is down to burn the witches. And that includes purging all of the Radical Inquisitors too. So him and Eisenhorn come to head more than once. And you can see here, this isn't actually Tyrus. I think this is actually a concept for Codia's later on. If you see the double-handed bird up there too. So there's a Codia's sort of, no demon hammer, he's got a sword instead, but like an early concept by John Blanche. All right, Space Marine characters. So, remember when I said the most damage you can do with a gun in the game is the multi-melt? It does like 70 points if it maxes out. So, Space Marines, Ram Generation, they're on average, and you don't get like a Space Marine Captain. You never get anything bigger than just like a random Space Marine. And that's also held up in the books that come up for this game. So in Xenos, I think, Eisenhorn meets a Space Marine for the first time when he's like 150 years old or something ridiculous. And it like melts his brain. And he's like a senior Inquisitor at that point, and he can't even like comprehend how big and crazy they are. Dan Abnett gets Space Marines right, I think, for the first time in writing in Xenos. He meets this brother Steinwolf. I think it's brother Captain Steinwolf. He's like a Death Watch Marine. They go to fight in this weird planet, and like he just can't comprehend how big this guy, like how crazy big this guy is. But here again, this is where the game kind of breaks, because Space Marines in this game are the way Space Marines are in the books. So weapon skill and blow skill fairly like, I mean, high for human standard, but like 75 and 75 is pretty high. It's 65 and 2d10 for either one. But then you get to your strength, which is on average 200. So 185 plus 4d10. Now, the strength bonus, once you get over 100, is insane, which means that throwing a rock, a Space Marine would do more damage than firing his bolt gun. If he just hit you with his bare hands, and we had to house rule some stuff, what we did was we tended to house rule the strength bonus to the full strength bonus if you're using both hands. Then if you're going one hand, you get half the strength bonus. And even then, it was just a madness amount of damage. I think he did something like plus 35 points of damage because of his strength. So I think for every 5 points over 100, it was like plus 1 damage or something like that. So he was getting like, oh, maybe it was less than that, I don't remember. Because even humans could get, it was maybe every 5 points over 75 or something like that, you got a damage bonus, and his strength was just like off the chart. So he'd throw a pebble, and it would do more damage than like firing his bolter. But then toughness is 150 on average, so 125 plus 40-10. So you have to think, if he gets shot in the face with a multi-melta, there's only a 5% chance of him passing out, and it's a 95% chance on average that he just lives. Like, he's just fine. He'd go to 80 if he had the average toughness, but like if you got to your max toughness here, which is 165, he just doesn't die. Like, it's almost impossible to kill a Space Marine with shooting. And then like all the damage is being reduced by his power armor too, so if he's naked, he might pass out. Most of the time he's shrugging off a whole bunch of damage at the same time. And his initiative was like 85, so he had like a crazy amount of actions. And then his brain stats were kind of average human, like 60 plus 3d10, so like between 75 and 95 for his nerve. His bravery is the one thing that wouldn't break. And then probably one of the nicest Jessica miniatures in here besides Covenant is Brother Captain Artemis. Just a beautiful miniature, and he actually was done in 28 mil when they redid the Death Watch book. And then we had Mechanicus characters, again, fairly human standard, but they get like their cool special weapons that are just theirs. And Magus Delphin Gruss was the miniature for this. A Rogue Trader, so Duke Von Castellan, so you could have a Rogue Trader. Cultist and Fanatic characters, so Devotee Malekith. Imperial Guard vets like Sergeant Stone, the Gland War veteran. He fought in the Gland Wars where they like stimmed everybody up and gave them all the drugs. And then we get on to the color section real fast. It does jump back into characters for a bit, but there's Covenant, wonderful miniature. There's Eisenhorn and Artemis. Damien 1427, the first time we see Arco-Flagellants. Preacher Joseph, who's a priest character. Von Castellan, the Rogue Trader, and then Eisenhorn himself. But this is Eisenhorn later in life, right? So this is like, and this is Hereticus Eisenhorn when he's got his legs all shot out by Fishig. Cherubel, the Daemon Host. Slick Devlin, he's a scummer, so he's like a pistol fighter. With jaundice apparently, because his skin is like yellow in this for some reason. Quavandius, the mutant, because you could have mutants. Savrina and Savora Devout, the two Death Cult assassins. Tyrus, oh, what a great miniature. And then Barbaretta. Barbaretta, get it? She's the Chastener, the cop, basically. Sergeant Stone, and Malekith, the freaky cultist, redemptionist. And then Delphin Gruss, the Inquisitor. Oh, I love this. Inquisitor Pelagia and her henchman by Adrian Smith. What a great, great, great piece of art. So Desperados, like Slick Devlin. Enforcers. Mutants. Ecclesiarchy characters, that was Preacher Joseph. Arco-Flagellants. Assassins, and the one thing, where is he? The Demon Host. Yes, there he is. Cherubel, the Cherub of Baal. The freaky demon-possessed dudes. The best part, I mean, I don't want to spoil it. The best part is who this is in the picture, because Cherubel, in the end, the person that's the Cherubel's inhabiting is the first person that Eisenhorn meets, which I think is great. And then we've got some classic piece of artwork. This is an old Dave Gallagher piece of Inquisitor Grunwald. I think that's a second edition art piece though. That was an older piece they repurposed. And then the modeling glossary. So like, how do you make these miniatures? Because they're 54 mil and everyone's freaking out about it. Like this one, Inquisitor Hawk. Dude's just in a chair. And people converting using 40K bits. This is my favorite right here. I think Mark Bedford made this. No, Ali Morrison made this. Grunga 676, the Ogren servitor made out of the old fantasy giant. I think that's actually a Morrison giant too. Is it Ali? Maybe it's Trish. I can't remember who made the giant. I think it was Ali Morrison. It's got a cybernetic leg here using the bits from the Dreadnought, and then just lots and lots and lots of like other Dreadnought bits and cabling and stuff. Just a wonderful conversion. And then some of the terrain they made for it. I actually, at one point when I was in Warhammer World, saw this terrain because it was still in use, because you could use it for 40K and stuff too. It is an incredible like set of terrain, all done in 54 mil. Because like it fit the 54 mil, but you could still use it in 28 mil. It is a pretty incredible setup they made for all this photography. Really well done. And then I love this, the Logan's World sort of thing. They did this like Old West kind of table as well. Zerona, a barren planet, kind of Logan's Worldy, but it's got all these great like lifters. Like they actually use like a bike chain for that, which I think is fantastic. And these are all based on a hard styrofoam building that they actually made for the game. Or maybe it's based on these that you're able to buy for a while when they're doing hard styrofoam. Then you got some Cal Jericho, because why not have Cal Jericho in a game like this? And then the Game Master section, so how to run a campaign, writing scenarios, giving outlines and stuff, and running a campaign. Some notes by Joris Johnson, so his inspiration, these Old West games he used to play, going through star systems. This is actually great for anybody. These are fantastic notes. And then the appendix, just like additional rules, things you might want to use, character sheets. And thankfully this game, because it had so much stuff in it, actually had a glossary. So a full glossary of terms at the end. And there it is, the end. Mark Bedford's beautiful, beautiful 54 mil like Scrivener diorama. I think he did this for Games Day one year. Just a fantastic piece of work. And there it is. So my copy of Inquisitor and my review of this game. So let's just wrap this up and talk about why was this game not as successful I think as Games Workshop wanted to be. Because this is one of those games that kind of lingered on shelves. There was product kind of kicking around for a long time. They did the odd release for it with Fnatic, but it never really took off. Well, I said earlier, it's two things. One, the mindset of the gamers at the time were not into RPGs. Narrative gaming was not something on people's brains in 3rd edition. There was a lot of tournaments happening. The game was being played fairly competitively, and it was not normal to play narrative games. You saw them in White Dwarf, but you didn't play them pick up in the store. So this was a real oddity coming out of the studio kind of out of left field. Number two, the 54 mil scale. People couldn't use the miniatures in their armies, and it was a pretty high price tag. We're talking 45, 50 bucks a miniature here in Canada, probably 20, 25 pounds per miniature. Even for like building like a 3 or 4 person warband, plus all the bits you wanted to use to convert everything, is a lot to just dive in and play like a little RPG. And then last but not least is the amount of work it took. There weren't a lot of people in this hobby that were willing to do like the game mastering work. I was lucky in that I had friends who were already in RPGs and had some background and that kind of thing. And even for us, it was a lot of prep work to tell the little stories we wanted to tell. And so the biggest, most lasting impact this game had was actually the background and the lore, because of all the things that came out for this release in 2001, the novels were probably the most popular. For years, when people wanted to understand the Games Workshop hobby, my one recommendation was go and buy the Eisenhorn trilogy. Go and buy Xenos, Malleus, and Hereticus and read them. They explain 40K better than any other books I think explain 40K, because it's from the point of view of the average Imperial citizen seeing this huge universe. You're not seeing these action heroes. It's not like watching a video game happen, like, and then he shot another orc, and then he shot another orc. It's a visceral look at like the soft white underbelly of the Imperium, and it really changed how people looked at 40K. If you watch the later books by like Aaron Dembski Bowden and stuff come out, their take on Space Marines became very much the Jez Goodwin, or not the Dan Abnett take on Space Marines, where they're puzzling. The humans have a hard time being around them. They're a rarity. They're not everywhere, right? The way they are when we look at the tabletop game. And authors going forward, and just the look and feel of 40K was kind of indelibly changed with this release, because I think the design studio themselves figured out what they wanted 40K to feel like and encompassed it in this one book. So even though it wasn't successful necessarily as a game system, and I'm not saying it wasn't for anybody, there's lots of people that are huge diehard Inquisitor fans, and there were people publishing like their own supplements for this game. Like, I think they still are, like up until recently. There's get-togethers. It spawned Inquisitor 28, a really popular way of playing this game now in 28 mil. Typically right now they're using the Necromunda rules, like the Venator gangs, because you can basically make anything in this book out of that, and kind of fudging together and cobbling together rules. Also came out of this, the look and the feel of like painting miniatures in that Blanchitsu style came out of this. And so while it wasn't necessarily commercially successful on its own merits as a game system, all the ancillary stuff around it, the art, the feel, the story, the way it looked at 40K, I would say for the next 20 years now, because we're in 2020, this is in 2001, have influenced the way that the game went. And Gav Thorpe should be really proud of this book, and also the rest of the team that worked on this. Dan Emnett, John Blanche, and all of the people that were, like part of the art direction and stuff as well, Jervis for the game mastery stuff. Because this has had probably the biggest effect of any one Games Workshop release, I would say, just trickling down into the game and sort of the history and the way that went in general. So there it is, my Throwback Thursday look at the Inquisitor rulebook, the Battle for the Emperor's Soul, a really, really important piece of gaming history. And if you don't have a copy, I highly recommend tracking one down and picking it up. It is a I would say pivot point, a turning point in 40K. And of course the Eisenhorn books as well, Xenos Ravener. So you can get them you can get them as an omnibus now, I think, with some of the short stories for it put in between too. I highly recommend picking that up and this up if you're a 40K aficionado, because this is a big turning point for 40K, and kind of informed the way 40K has been for the next 20 years after that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you for another Throwback Thursday GMG review in the future. Next time, I'm Ash. Have a good night. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Death Ray Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.